the Linux ecosystem is often described as vast, fragmented, and sometimes overwhelming. But that description only scratches the surface. Beneath the familiar names that dominate YouTube thumbnails and recommendation lists lies an entire underground of lists, distributions that exist for reasons far more interesting than popularity. These distros are not designed to win market share or please everyone. They exist because someone, somewhere, had a specific problem, a specific vision, or a specific philosophy about how computing should work. This deep dive is about exploring that hidden layer of Linux, where projects like Hyperion and other obscure but fascinating distributions quietly evolve, often unnoticed, yet deeply influential in their own way. When most people talk about Linux, they usually mean Ubuntu, Fedora, Arch, Debian, or maybe Linux Mint. These distros are excellent entry points, stable, polished, and supported by large communities. But the Linux world is not shaped only by what is popular. It is shaped by experimentation, by people willing to break conventions, rewrite assumptions, and sometimes rebuild entire systems from the ground up. Hidden gem distros are where those experiments live. They are the places when new ideas are tested long before they ever reach mainstream adoption, if they ever do at all. Hyperion is one of those names that doesn't appear often in mainstream discussions, and that alone makes it interesting. It represents a class of Linux distributions that are built with a very specific goal rather than broad appeal. In many cases, distros like Hyperion are designed around performance tuning, minimalism, research, or a very opinionated workflow. They are not trying to compete with Ubuntu. They are trying to redefine what a Linux system can feel like when it is stripped of unnecessary layers and focused on a particular experience. What makes Hyperion intriguing is not just what it includes, but what it intentionally leaves out. Like many hidden gem distros, it challenges the assumption that an operating system must come with a massive collection of pre-installed tools, services, and graphical layers. Instead, it often focuses on core functionality, speed, and clarity. This approach forces the user to think differently about their system. Instead of asking, what can this OS do for me out of the box? The question becomes, what kind of system do I want to build on top of this foundation? This philosophy is shared by many lesser-known distributions. Some are minimal to the extreme, offering little more than a kernel, a package manager, and a shell. Others experiment with unconventional init systems, alternative desktop environments, or immutable file system designs long before those ideas become trends. In many ways, these distros act as laboratories for the Linux ecosystem. Even if they never become popular, their ideas often spread. One of the reasons hidden gem distros remain hidden is that they usually demand more from the user. They assume curiosity, patience, and a willingness to read documentation. They do not always hold your hand. In fact, some of them deliberately avoid doing so. This can be intimidating, but it can also be empowering. When you install and configure a distro like Hyperion or a similarly obscure project, you are not just using Linux, you are actively shaping it. Another reason these distros stay under the radar is marketing, or rather, the lack of it. Many projects are maintained by one person or a very small team. They don't have the time or interest to promote their work on social media or chase YouTube coverage. Their focus is on solving problems, not building brands. Ironically, this often results in cleaner design decisions and more coherent philosophies because the project is driven by vision rather than popularity. The deeper you go into the world of hidden Linux distros, the more you start to notice recurring themes. One of the biggest is control. Many of these systems are designed to give users absolute control over their environment. That control might come in the form of source-based package management, highly customizable build systems, or minimal defaults that force intentional configuration. This is not control for the sake of complexity, but control as a way to remove abstraction layers that obscure how the system really works. Hyperion, like several other obscure distributions, often appeals to users who want to understand Linux at a deeper level. It may not be ideal for someone looking to quickly get work done with minimal setup, but it can be perfect for someone who wants to learn how everything fits together. That learning process is part of the experience. Every configuration file edited, every dependency installed, and every system decision made contributes to a stronger understanding of the operating system. Beyond Hyperion, there are countless other hidden gems that each explore a different idea. Some distros focus on security and privacy, stripping away anything that could potentially leak information or introduce attack surfaces. Others focus on real-time performance for audio production, scientific computing, or embedded systems. Some are built entirely around tiling window managers and keyboard-driven workflows, prioritizing efficiency over visual polish. These projects may never attract millions of users, but for the people they serve, they can be transformative. One fascinating aspect of exploring these distros is how they reinterpret the concept of a desktop. In mainstream operating systems, the desktop is a fixed idea: icons, panels, menus, and predefined behaviors. In many hidden gem Linux distros, the desktop is just another component, optional and replaceable. You might boot into a console and build your graphical environment piece by piece, choosing exactly how windows behave, how input is handled, and how resources are allocated. This approach can feel radical if you are coming from a more traditional OS background, but once you experience it, it becomes difficult to go back. You start to realize how many assumptions you previously accepted without question. Why should an OS decide how notifications look? Why should a desktop environment consume a large portion of system resources by default? Why should updates be handled in a way that disrupts your workflow? Hidden gem distros exist to question those assumptions. Another important characteristic of these lesser-known projects is how closely they aligned with Linux's original philosophy. Linux was never meant to be a monolithic product. It was meant to be modular, flexible, and adaptable. Over time, mainstream distributions have necessarily added layers of abstraction to make Linux more accessible. That is not a bad thing, but it does create distance between the user and the system. Distros like Hyperion attempt to close that distance again. Community culture also plays a big role in these projects. Smaller distros tend to have tighter, more focused communities. Discussions are often more technical and less repetitive. Instead of beginner questions being asked thousands of times, conversations tend to revolve around design decisions, optimizations, and future direction. This can be incredibly refreshing if you enjoy deep technical discussions and collaborative. Of course, using a hidden gem distro is not without its challenges. Documentation can be sparse or outdated. Bugs may take longer to fix. Hardware compatibility might require manual tweaks. These are real trade-offs, and they are part of the reason these distros remain niche. But for many users, those challenges are not drawbacks. They are features. They encourage learning, experimentation, and Hyperion and similar projects also highlight how diverse the Linux landscape truly is. There is no single Linux experience. There are hundreds of interpretations, each shaped by different priorities. Some prioritize stability above all else, freezing packages for years. Others prioritize freshness, pushing updates as fast as possible. Some focus on enterprise use, others on personal expression. Hidden gem distros often occupy the edges of this spectrum, exploring extremes that mainstream projects avoid. Another interesting pattern is how many hidden distros are ahead of their time. Ideas like immutable systems, atomic updates, declarative configuration, and minimal base images were once obscure concepts explored only by niche projects. Today, they are becoming mainstream topics. This cycle repeats constantly. What begins as an experiment in a small distro may eventually influence the entire ecosystem. Exploring these projects also changes how you evaluate operating systems in general. Instead of asking which OS is best, you start asking which OS aligns with your values and workflow. Do you value simplicity or flexibility, stability or innovation, automation or manual control? Hidden gem distros are not trying to answer these questions for you. They are inviting you to answer them yourself. Hyperion, in that sense, is less of a product and more of an invitation. It invites users to think differently about their relationship with their computer. It invites them to slow down, to understand, and to take responsibility for their system. That may sound intimidating, but it can also be incredibly satisfying. There is a unique sense of ownership that comes from running a system you truly understand. As you dive deeper into the world of obscure Linux distributions, you begin to notice how interconnected everything is. Developers move between projects, ideas are shared, patches are reused, and philosophies evolve. Even if a distro disappears, its influence often lives on through the people who worked on it and the ideas it introduced. In this way, no project is ever truly wasted. Hidden gem distros also remind us that Linux is not controlled by a single entity. There is no central authority deciding which ideas are allowed. Anyone can create a distribution, experiment with radical concepts, and share them with the world. Most will never become popular, but popularity is not the point. Freedom is for content creators, enthusiasts, and curious users. Exploring these lesser-known projects can be a source of endless inspiration. Every distro tells a story, a story about why it exists and what problem it is trying to solve. Hyperion's story, like many others, is about focus, intentionality, and pushing back against unnecessary complexity. In the end, a deep dive into Hyperion and other hidden gems is really a deep dive into the soul of Linux itself. It is a reminder that beneath the polished surfaces of popular distributions lies a world of experimentation and passion. A world where operating systems are not just tools, but expressions of ideas. A world where the question is not how many users a distro has, but how clearly it expresses its purpose. If you have only ever used mainstream Linux distributions, exploring these hidden projects can feel like discovering a secret side of the operating system you thought you knew. It can be frustrating, enlightening, and deeply rewarding all at once. And even if you never settle on one of these distros as your daily driver, the experience of using them will change how you see Linux forever. That is the true value of Hyperion and other hidden gem distros. They expand your understanding of what Linux can be. They challenge your assumptions. And they remind you that in the world of open source, innovation often happens quietly, far away from the spotlight, waiting for curious minds to discover it.